Test. I think we should get started, right? So excellent session that we attended just now, and there are a lot of clues from that for us to actually talk about. Ultimately, that was a session more oriented towards the business, and the leaders from the banking were there. And the security is here to support that. Ultimately, security doesn't exist on its own, right? And it has to align with the business objectives, support the digital transformation that we are talking about today, or AI, or whatever you call it. And we are now to align. So let me first of all thank the panelists, specifically the Dr. Naik, who has come all the way from Jalgaon. And I'm sure many of you also must have come from various places in the country. I'm sure in the next about half an hour or so, we'll have some meaningful discussion. We'll try and share our experiences and some practical knowledges rather than just talking about some theories. So we also heard about compliance, increasing compliance, whether we comply just for the sake of putting a tick mark, or we actually, doing it in spirit. So when we look at cybersecurity, the first thing comes to our mind is SOC, and attacks, and threats, and defense, and incidents, and recovery, and all that. But then, over the past, let's say, for cooperative banks, if we are talk about, since 2019, when the cybersecurity framework was released by the regulator, since then the focus on the compliance, while that framework is very good in strengthening the cybersecurity and the controls and the ability to recover and all that, but still, it comes along with the burden of compliance, right? You still need to comply with certain requirements. And after that, there have been so many other circulars and guidelines. So probably I'll start with Bhaskar. What is your take on this in terms of maintaining a balance between ensuring protection, the defenses against the cyber threats for the organization, that is on one hand, and the other end, ensuring the compliance, because I'm sure you would require a lot of resources and efforts to ensure the compliance, which is more of a non-technical, I would say.
Good afternoon, everyone. See, your question is a difficult question. Being a CISO is a double-edged sword, actually. So you have to protect the transaction which customer is doing, the device you have to protect, the safe and secure mode of transaction you have to do. You have to protect the infrastructure which is lying in your bank's premises, or the data center, or DR site, all those things. Third is you have to do the regulatory compliances, which is much more important, because nowadays a lot of things are happening. And fourth is to convince the board. So the role of CISO is a very difficult job altogether. See, as you said, the first line of defense is how to protect our infrastructure. That is most important, because you have to have a multi-layered kind of environment wherein you have to deploy many things. Not only deploy, you have to monitor, and you have to mitigate also. See, only deploying doesn't make sense. You are putting best of the technology, but if you are not monitoring those things, it's of no use actually. So ultimately, you have to protect your infrastructure, multi-layered infrastructure, not only the firewall you talk about, there are firewalls, IDS, IPS, then SOC you have to maintain, then DLP-like solutions, then proxy. So many things are lined up.
So, Bhaskar, I will, if I have to be very, because Devi Shankar said, it has to be a very crisp session. I mean, it's going to be a very crisp session. So, because, everybody is waiting for lunch after this, right? So, what has this increasing load of compliance on banks and maybe CISO functions has resulted, or how has it resulted in some restructuring of the CISO function or the teams within it? Like, earlier it was primarily technical people, technical aspects that are being handled, the activities, but now the GRC part of it also coming under the CISO role. So, how it has kind of change the structure of the CISO department, and how we have managed to cope with that?
See, GRC is one of the important factor, and being a CISO, you have to, nowadays things are that everything you have to certify, being a CISO. So it is part and parcel of the role of a CISO. So many things are there, you have to satisfy the regulator also. whatever. Even the thing is that suppose the DBA is filing a query, even for that also CISO has to certify. So many things are there. GRC is one of the part and parcel of the CISO role actually. You have to comply all these things, whether it is complied, whatever deployed, not only the security portion, even in the infrastructure level you talk about, even in the database level you talk about.
Have you created separate teams?
Is a part and parcel of this GRC.
So have you created separate teams? You know, you have a technical team and then you have a team that is focusing on compliance aspects, various regulatory submissions.
See, what we have done, I see everything is doing
to actually compete with whatever the requirements and what are the compliance requirements arises. Yep.
So, Dr. Naik, if I were to ask about segregation of duties and being, cooperative banks relatively smaller in size, smaller in business, lot of constraints on resources, whether it's a human resources or it's a financial resources in terms of tools and technologies implemented. How do you effectively ensure that there is segregation of duties either within your team or function of cybersecurity or outside when it comes to, let's say, the most closely interacted teams are IT, right?
Yeah.
So how do you, what is your approach towards it? How do you maintain that kind of segregation of duties and avoid conflict of interest and avoid any insider threats resulting out of that?
It is actually better to keep the minimum level of access that is required to carry out their type of work. Only that much should be granted. Sometimes there are some exceptions. We have to look at those exceptions very carefully and see to that segregation of duties is adhered to in your organization.
So, with increasing, say, when we talk about segregation of duties, that means creating more roles, and that means you can't double hat. You can't wear conflicting roles and give it to assign to the same person. Otherwise, it loses the meaning. Like for example, in operations, maker and checker having same person having both the access, it has no meaning, right? So in this case, it indirectly means that, or even directly means that you need more people, right, to play different roles, to avoid any hand-in-glove situation or avoid any conflict of interest or any intentional frauds or even any other incidents, cyber incidents. Now, that may also be challenging for the HR of the organization to actually get the right resources in right time at right cost, and then make them stay back. So then that I'm sorry, I'm actually talking something that may lead to another question is that calls for increasing reliance on partners and third parties, because you can't leverage your internal team. You can't build really internal team and a sustainable team with a completely updated skills and all that. So that calls for reliance and tie-ups with third parties. So maybe Tabrez, you can now answer that.
Actually, implementing user behavior analytics plus privilege access management will help us to identify all this and overcome these issues, because those are the things which will identify the profiles of the vendors, profiles for the employees, and the duty segregations. So actually the patterns of what they are doing on user behavior and the access granted to them. So this will be really of a great help.
Anything on the third party risks or the supply chain risks?
Yeah, definitely. All these types of increasing outsourcing that UCBs are going on, they need to ensure that the vendor risk has to be managed properly. Actually, there are many guidelines coming in from regulators, the most prominent being the 10th April 2024 guideline from RBI, which mandated the review of due diligence of the outsourced IT services and vendors. So the organizations like UCBs, which are having less skilled, IT skilled manpower, IT security skilled manpower. So such type of organizations are increasingly outsourcing the activities. And they need to they need to put up controls wherever possible to ensure that the vendor, whoever is providing the services, is adhering to the guidelines or not. And probably you need to carry out some sort of certification checking of that vendor yourself or through third-party auditors. That is how you can control. Since many UCBs don't have what we can say, sizable number of in-house resources, they are increasingly relying on outside parties. So in such scenarios, you need to have the stricter SLAs to ensure that the required level of services are being maintained, the required quality of services are being maintained, and to ensure that the required security posture is maintained while providing the services to the organizations like UCBs.
So in the previous session, a lady asked that question about, how do we ensure that vendor is the right vendor, rightly qualified, rightly resourced, and they have the ability to deliver in all aspects in line with the compliance or regulatory compliance requirements. Now, smaller banks, do they always have the real, that power to actually drive the service providers to actually demand those requirements, even though those are regulatory requirements? Because there may not be anything preventing them from doing that business if they do not meet the compliance requirements. Because ultimately the owners of compliance is on banks. So,
yes,
ultimately, the question would be, during the audit, the question would be, you have a choice of selecting any other partner. Okay, but then it becomes difficult. But there are, let's say, 1,000 service providers providing the same service. We need to go and pick and choose the right partner that meets the compliance requirement, that may not actually meet your budgetary requirements. Now, it's a difficult situation to be in. So while we can draw references from other banks, but other banks' situation might be different, their landscape might be different, their budget availability could be different. So, Bhaskar ji, कुछ इसके ऊपर आपका कुछ views है? Very general, broad views. We are talking very openly here, so nothing specific to your organization. But what do you think? How should smaller banks should approach these kind of engagements with the partners?
See, third-party risk is always there. When you talk about, I'll just give a brief example. Recently, what happened? There was one small attack on the CH. Everybody knows that. A small attack on the CH, entire cooperative bank, more than 250 banks were down. So what regulator says, this is the responsibility of the bank to actually verify whether the party is doing proper compliances or not. Although we are sharing the resources from them, but this is our duty. We can't do that, but we have to get it done from the third party. There are multiple ways available. You can call all the reports, all the assessment they have done, everything they have done, VAPT is done, or APSIC they have done or not, penetration test they have done or not. In last 3 years report, like what we does basically, before we actually go live, there's a requirement of CISO approval. So whatever you are buying, the complete detail has to submit to CISO, and if CISO agreed on that and is satisfied, then only we approve that to go ahead. In certain cases, what happened, we get certain things that CISO approval, but in that case, the parties already had a vulnerable, then CISO will not apply. Certain things comes out.
So the example that you gave about 300 banks got affected, okay, mostly of smaller sizes. These 300 banks, and because the regulatory requirement is that they have the owners of ensuring the compliance with best practices and all that. So these 300 banks will carry out audit throughout the year, and the service provider will attend to all the audits, 300 audits. Is that could that be a better model? Anything on the group audit or something that you want to mention?
In fact, of late, RBI, IBA has come out with the concept of pooled audit of the service providers, IT service providers. So probably what the organizations can do, banks can do, they can come together. If they are customers of the same service provider, they can come together and carry out pooled audit of that particular IT service provider. Again, IBA has come up with extensive guidelines on pooled audit, and they have come out with a different model. Probably UCBs can have their own model for pooled audit of IT service providers. And what we can ensure is that the required level of compliances that the onus is, the responsibility is on the UCBs for the outsourced services provided by the IT service provider. But those required compliances are ensured by the IT service provider. That can be ensured through these types of pooled audits. And further to the concept of pooled audits, they are even saying that these pooled audits have to be carried out on yearly basis. So it's an annual exercise now for most of the IT service providers and their customer banks.
Yeah, it's a good move. Pooled audit will save efforts on both the sides, the service provider side as well as the bank side.
Third part of risk assessment need to be done, and it has to be done for all critical services, whether it is a mobile bank, internet, all critical services, it need to be done. We cannot do it, but we can outsource it to third party. And in fact, in the last circular RBI mentioned, it has to be done physically. We have to deploy the person physically. Suppose you are sharing the services for ATM service provider, mobile banking, it has to be deployed at their level and it has to be conducted on a regular basis. So it has to be done, and that is one of the best practice, because we don't have resources. Being a cooperative, everybody knows that we don't have that much. So better to outsource it to third party. There are many vendors available in the industry. You can outsource it to them and let them submit an independent report. Every year, even if you're the existing vendor, you have to conduct this thing.
So, coming back to my first question about the increasing compliance requirements and the ongoing, continuing defense requirements, where do you see your most of the time is spent, and where you should be focusing? What is the actual reality, and what you wish you could be doing better?
See, I'll just give detail on that, what we are doing it basically. See, we have a team right now. See, may not be every bank is having their own team, because being a large bank, we have our own team, security team, who look multiple different teams who looks after the email security. Some of them look after endpoint security. Like we have defined. So we have all the teams, but my work goes on to monitor all those things, and every level, every day morning I come, I look up the SIM, what are the alerts are come.
My question is on how much of your time you spend on the technical matters, and how much time you spend on the...
Every day morning I'll look after all those things. Then the accessibility comes into picture. Then the regulatory comes, whatever regulatory circulars come, advisories, alerts, all those things we have to reply. You might be knowing one of the big circular, 450 questions on SOC. So those things are there. Then the board requirement. We divide our time into all these three segments, and but most of my time goes to the technicality, being a technical person, into deployment, into risk assessment, all those things we do. And we do from third party, a lot of things we do it. In spite of having our own team, but we do a lot of risk assessment.
Okay. Coming to one of the latest anybody wants to add something to this?
I think, do you want to add something? Okay. Let me quickly add one point. So roughly we can say that 25% of the time for checking up the compliances, security compliances, 10-15% to help the IT team for their security compliances, and 20-25% to find out about the new types of threats that have emerged, cyber crimes that have happened, which finding out their modus operandi, etc. So that is how it is spent, and 10-15% in other meetings.
Other meetings. So
other meetings.
That's very important. I was waiting for somebody to say that, because the previous session was about digital transformation, and we must stay with the game. If not ahead, we can't be ahead of business, but we have to stay with business, understand where the business is trying to move with the help of technology, what are they trying to achieve, and how we can proactively think of probable defenses to safeguard that new innovative technology being implemented in the bank. So I think that 10% is very important, though it's less, and that 10% I think will require your own time. You cannot outsource that 10% to somebody else. So that will require your own core expertise and knowledge and involvement. So I think that it's very important. You wanted to add?
Actually, yeah, he covers most of the things what we also do actually. So we plan for the first half of the office timings in investigating and matching the compliances what we have received, identifying how to mitigate, because every time we face something new, so that has to be properly taken care of. So that assures that we start and we ensure by the end of the day we reach to a conclusion that we have a solution for that. Because moving without a solution, it becomes very difficult for us to move forward. So that's the reason we have to ensure that the compliance takes care of.
Good. Now, the most recent announcement on two fronts. One was about introducing the .bank.in domain and having all the banks register their own domain names through this, so that it's abc.bank.in, xyz.bank.in, and that domain will be, of course, controlled. It is being going to be controlled by IDRBT, and it will remain within the .in India registry, so that have better control over any misuse of that and any views on that, how it will help the banks? Why should banks quickly get onto that and adopt that and make the changes? Because the changes are going to be depending on the size of the bank, the digital footprint of the bank. There might be different varying level of efforts required to change the domain. Particularly it is a public facing, so it will require some time. So any advice on that too?
I think the renaming of these domains is just going to help in terms of security. It's going to help us in the field of trust, that if it is properly coming from a bank source, then it could be a trusted domain. So that's the reason. And plus, I think one circular is regarding the introduction of 140 and 160 for consumer and for some transactional SMSs. So these kind of things is going to help in long run, provided the proper security, means just changing the domain name, it's not going to help. It needs to be properly secured. It needs to be handled and hosted on trusted infrastructure where parameter and core security is implemented. SSL technology means we have moved from HTTP to HTTPS, but nowadays people are just trying to hack that as well. So there are cloning of your certificates. A lot of things are happening in the this threat modeling. So this is not really going to help, but it's okay. Means just like you are changing a city's name, it's just going to add extra burden of cost to the bank. But it's a long-term exercise actually to change all over the place.
Yes. I just wanted to add on to this. This is just one side of the coin. That changing of domain name bank.in and then 140, 160 toll-free numbers for marketing and transactional calls from the bank side. This is just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is concerned with the customers. Unless we educate our customers, make them aware that there are nothing called as free lunches. If somebody is offering you interest rates and he's saying that we'll double your money in 2 months, then what he is promising is which is not possible. Or stock market scam or KYC scams. We need to actually spend time on customer education. So raise their awareness. That's it.
Yeah. So this blue tick concept, X and other WhatsApp and all, they have started. So is there kind of due diligence when these guys are going to give us the domain bank.in or something? Is there kind of some authenticity or authentication done that is been provided by some genuine resources? That is more important, because anybody, you don't need to submit any documentation for buying such kind of domains. Anybody can buy. So it's not going to help unless some authority says that, it's been procured from us and it's going to be the genuine thing, so you can have a blind trust and get onto this.
So, Bhaskar ji.
I just wanted to add a different perspective apart from this. Okay. See, being a cooperative bank, we have multiple reasons actually. So today we don't have a kind of environment what other banks are having, like security. We don't have people in the security arena. How many people we have? You look at even from the large bank to the small bank, that's a big challenge for the bank. So what we do, we keep on outsourcing our resources to third party. Second thing is that keep protecting our own infrastructure which is lying in our data center. So this is the big challenge. When you go outside, what happened with the other CH and all, that's the risk is already there. Third party risk is one of the major risks, I would say, for the cooperative bank, because we are doing a lot of outsourcing. At every level, we are doing outsourcing from data center to the transaction level, everything we are doing. So that one area we have to protect from third parties. Second thing, the things which you have at your data center. See, only compliance doesn't solve the purpose. You have to deploy multiple layers in the data center. You have to deploy multiple layers for the application level. You have to have a complete gamut of security layers. Whether it is a network segmentation you talk, in our case we have done a micro segmentation where each and every server has been segregated. Each and every server, suppose if a person try to intrude into my system, he won't be able to go to other side. Apart from that, like EDR solution you talk about, then so many proxies you talk. You give only the access which is required to run the bank. So such things are different because it is a bit difficult.
So I think there are a lot of challenges. Yes, we all agree with you, but I didn't want to talk about AI. But then these days, nothing is complete without mentioning AI, right?
Yeah,
so maybe Tabrez, you want to tell some benefits of use cases of AI in cybersecurity or the cybersecurity functions.
So this AI has approximately impact on security for multifaceted, bringing both the positive and negative effects. So in terms of positive, there are enhanced threat detections which AI helps. Okay, so in these situations, the transactions, if you have something defined for transaction journey, this AI tool will help to identify where the flaws are, and then it will give you a real-time access to rectify and mitigate these issues. So other than that, we have this predictive analytics where AI can detect some certain level of transaction frauds and all through the AML and AI/ML which has been pitched by NPCI. So these all informations can be taken care with predictive analytics. And apart from this, there are some negative impacts also. Means the resources would be need to have proper skill sets in defining AI tools and how to use it, and also these are the.
See, many of the analytical and predictive models, they were built into many of the products for a number of years now. So I think generative AI is something that may help the security teams in terms of let's say preparing some reports out of, let's say you have a log, okay, you want to create a report that is for executives, a summary out of that for executives. You have DLP logs or you have some other incident log. You rather than you spending time and then if you are not there, you delegate to your assistant and that person using own terminology, own style of presenting, So I think these kind of, either formal reporting or informal reporting, that's where the generative AI, if rightly, I don't know if there is anything exists like that right now, but these could be the use cases where you achieve consistent results and consistent approach. Even if it is wrong, it is consistently wrong, right? So that, you have some basis.
The infrastructure would be different for the generative AI to pick up. So if it is more likely generic information, then it will be helpful. But if my infrastructure is there, where the configuration and all details are different as compared to some other banks, how is going to help me then? Means if it goes to the generative AI. So it has to be, means the reports, the parameters, what has to be defined, it needs to be in such a place that it is quite generic in the first level. And then once this is input into the AI, generative AI temp or something, then this information has to pick the proper information. Otherwise, it's going to be like, mix and match of solutions, which we also get right now from Microsoft or something, which doesn't help. So it's not going to be specific, but it is like something high-level information. And if it is a jackpot, it might help. Otherwise, again, you'll have to struggle to find out the proper solution because everything everywhere will be different.
You have to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one point over here. What we want to do, we want to use AI. But in what manner? We want to reduce the work that is typically carried out by our people, IT people, because IT resources are very scarce. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to put up some model of AI on top of SOC alerts that we are generating. And we want to focus on only those alerts where actually the person's attention is required. All other false negative alerts can be automatically moved out and they can be checked out at a later state. But those which are critical, those need attention of the person, those will be highlighted first. So that can be checked up by the concerned SOC analyst on a priority basis. That is what is required because resources are scarce.
This is more kind of, automating intelligence over artificial intelligence. There is nothing, neurons or neural networks which is going to help us. It's our brain, we have to use it. So it's mostly the automating intelligence, I would say, rather than artificial intelligence.
Exactly. No, so that's why, it's a very, very few selective cases that we can identify for the AGI or...
I just wanted to add on one more point. Yeah. Related with AI.
Very, very quickly.
I think we have quickly.
Yeah.
Yes, this is related with those AI models which have come up, and many organizations are using those free models or public models. Your organization's data is getting uploaded, your data is getting stored, and it may be used up, and you never know about that. So, as a CISO, I would like to restrict such type of use of public AI models in our organization. So something like
DPDPA is there coming in the place.
Yeah.
Very important. But how do you achieve that?
Sir, because of that, we can enforce a policy. If you are using a mobile device and if you are using something like DeepSec, then your organization's data may get here. So something similar came in during this budget. Finance Ministry had issued a guideline to all their employees, asking them not to use any AI tools on their mobiles or any laptop devices.
So one is to have the policy. Policy is the first requirement, and the other is to monitor and prevent, basically, right? The idea is to prevent use and not punish. So basically to prevent. So you need to have right tools also in place, but we'll not get into that because then it becomes now.
So I think the current news is Jio and Adani Group is fighting with OpenAI because of the data being exposed through OpenAI. So that's one of the another.
True. Anyway, I'll request if there is any question, sir, please.
Not a question. I just wanted to reflect and put the architecture that we are building. The question that lady asked and some of the points that were discussed. We want to reduce this effort of UCBs having to deal with a large number of vendors, because 20 softwares you need, each has 15 to 20 providers, so some 300, 400 people to screen with. You don't have any rating model, no recommendation, nothing. We want to create that. We have discussed this with RBI. They have taken a stand that they'll not prescribe or proscribe any software. But as umbrella, we want to do that. The architecture we are building, because we are also a regulated entity. Some of these IT vendors, all of these IT vendors are not regulated entities. They are not audited. We will be audited by RBI. So when we are holding the infrastructure, hardware, software, monitoring, everything, we will be audited by RBI, will be regulated. So the member banks who are using, they have one layer of satisfaction that RBI is auditing the infra. They themselves can also audit the infra, like you said, physically. The banks are also, they can also audit the infra. Third, we want to create, like we have started for CBS. I spoke about this in my address, that we want to run a process of EOI, RFP, and come out with recommendation that these 3, 4, 5 max CBS providers are recommended. Like that, we want to run for LOS, LMS, every product that banks will be using. We just want to create a positive recommendation that these are the ones that we have tried and tested. These you can go with. What is happening right now, the negative case stories are also not coming in public forum, maybe because of legal points also. Like one tier 3 UCB in Bombay, one IT vendor promised 90 days implementation. It's been 5 years now. Implementation has not happened, and legally you cannot do anything because you didn't read the legal agreement properly. So we have started legal as a service free of cost, that whatever agreement you're signing, you can bounce with us. Most of it is free, some is subsidized cost, so that we can help UCBs with. And we can talk about these negative case stories. That on cybersecurity also, we want to take a data-driven approach. So we had a discussion with RBI where the general manager, Mr. A.G. Giridharan, he presented the data. All the cyber attacks that have happened on UCBs, what were the causes? How it started, how many days it took to detect the breach, and how they basically tried to rectify that. Biggest cause is email spoofing. And when we see the data, contact details of all the banks that we have received from RBI, most of the banks, all tier 2, tier 1 banks are using Gmail, Rediff Mail, Yahoo Mail, those kind of solutions. So we are discussing with a large email service provider. Their solution comes with inbuilt filtering and cybersecurity features that can you give us this solution at a subsidized cost at scale? Because so many branches, so many employees, you are getting reach to that scale, but can you bring the pricing down so that these banks can afford? And this in itself becomes a deterrent for email spoofing and attacks. That kind of data-driven approach, that what are the real causes, actual causes, how we can act against them, in addition to all the training initiatives that are required. Because whatever you build, your employees, your customers, if they are not aware, if they are not careful, it all can go for toss. Just one click on a wrong link can...
No, excellent initiatives. I think certainly it will help all the banks, particularly the smaller banks. And any questions? Yes, gentleman there behind the camera.
Time for one question.
Good afternoon. I am Bipin Mathrawala. We are reinsurance brokers, and often cybersecurity insurance is being talked about. And, you know, like if you see in insurance, it is a very highly regulated thing. We have some 25 life companies and 25 non-life companies, and very well regulated. And insurance is the one which ultimately take risk from the bank. So I would say, you know, we protect India with just 0.3% of premium, whatever the assets. So my suggestion is that, you know, in banking you should have limited banks, you know, you should merge a lot of banks. And so far as cyber risk is concerned also, you should have a pool, kind of, where any bank has a problem, it should go to the central pool which says what is the problem, and it can be discussed, and better software can be created. Like for instance, like we do, you know, terrorism risk in India. So that one pool covers whole India. Any terrorism happening within India's territory is fully protected. So this is kind of suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, very, very quickly, I'll say that, yes, there are some entities which have created, for example, there are forums, IB card forums, and there are entities, you know, which collectively help banks to actually stay alerted and take actions on whatever advisories or alerts that are there in the wild. So there is some collective effort there, okay, but ultimately all banks, they have their own risk and their own appetite, so they have to manage their own, how much insurance to go for and all that. That's individual bank's call.
Hello.
You want to take that other question?
We do keep our knowledge base.
One last question.
Yeah. My name is Ajit Kumar Singh. I want to ask the one Gen AI, generative AI, how it will be helpful for the fraud detection and managing the credit scores. So can panel answer?
Like I mentioned, that if you have this transaction life cycle, it's not going to be generic AI or anything. It's the tools which are currently available, which you need to deploy in your environment. So it will identify the source and destinations. It will identify the mule accounts, and then you can take the decision yourself. There is nothing called artificial intelligence implemented as of now. It's more kind of automation which is taking place. So it's your intelligence which will help you to identify, because a lot of time it's happening that false positive alerts we are getting, and then we get information from NPCI or RBI to just whitelist and exclude those transactions. So it's the human intervention which is required, not the, it will gradually develop. It will, because it's just taking the market information what is available and just posting in your solution. So it's not really helping, but it's still the human intelligence which is helping out to identify this kind of frauds.
I think the Gen AI will help or will be leveraged by the fraudsters first to generate certain patterns of transaction to confuse the fraud detection systems. And that's where, there will be a learning to, how to prevent this from escaping our, monitoring systems. So I think that's a nutshell.
Yeah.
I think we have
one last question. Can you insight some of the securities that could be taken care in the data center for the cooperative banks?
I forgot your name, but
Ajit Kumar Singh.
Ajit, the design for the security has to be done on the study of your infrastructure. It could be 3-layer architecture for your security. It could be 2 layers, how many branches you have. So those things are the key parameters which you need to understand and deploy. Plus, depending on the size of your infrastructure, you need to define how you want to, manage the SOC. It should be through the vendors or it should be your own. So a lot of inputs from your third-party vendors, their due diligence in terms of security, how well they are equipped with, how well trained their staff are. So this kind of parameters will help you to define your architecture for your security part.
Thank you. Great session. Great session. I mean, this topic is so pivotal. It is so uppermost in our minds, brains, and the way we coexist every day. The firefighting that we do. So, cybersecurity, we can never have enough of this. So I'm sorry I have to stop this very interesting, absorbing discussion on the track somewhere.